The gossip spread through London's ballrooms like wildfire, consuming reputations with each hushed word. Lady Evelyn Hartmore stood at the centre of the Atherton Hall ballroom, her ivory gown catching the light of 1,000 candles, her grey-blue eyes, fixed upon a single white rose in a silver vase, betrayed nothing of the storm within her heart. "She'll never give him an heir," they whispered. 3 years wed, and not a cradle to show. The music faltered as the Marquis Miranda Vallecrest entered, her emerald gown rustling with calculated precision. She paused, allowing the assembly to admire her silver-blonde coiffure adorned with pearls that winked like cold stars. Her eyes, green as poison, found Lady Evelyn with predatory intent. "Lady Atherley," Miranda pronounced with a curtsy so perfect it cut like a knife. "How gracious of His Grace to permit your attendance. The season grows tedious without its disappointments." The ballroom fell silent. Fans ceased their fluttering. A violin bow creaked in the sudden hush. Evelyn's hands joined at her breast, a gesture of self-protection that had become habitual. "Your concern touches me deeply, Lady Vallecrest. I shall endeavour to provide amusement sufficient for your appetite." But the Marquis was not finished. She inclined her head, the gesture preceding her most venomous strikes. "I merely observe that a duchess who produces nothing of value becomes herself without value. Is that not the natural order?" A gasp rippled through the assembly. Ladies turned to one another behind raised fans. "I believe," came a deep voice from the entrance, "that value, like virtue, reveals itself in time." The Duke of Atherley stood framed in the doorway, his broad shoulders silhouetted against the gaslight. Sebastian Atherley's dark blue eyes surveyed the scene with the calm assessment of a man accustomed to command. His fingers absently smoothed the signet ring bearing his family crest, a white rose on a field of blue. "Your Grace," Miranda curtsied again, her smile not reaching her eyes. "We were just discussing matters of succession, a subject that must weigh heavily upon your considerations." Sebastian moved with deliberate steps across the polished floor, each footfall marking the tempo of a new waltz, beginning in the minds of the assembly. He reached his wife, taking her gloved hand with ceremonial precision. "Lady Vallecrest, permit me to educate you on a matter oft misunderstood," he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the suddenly breathless room. "The worth of a person is not measured by what they produce, but by what they preserve. My wife preserves the dignity of this house through trials that would shatter lesser souls." A whisper ran the length of the gallery. The musicians, sensing the shift in atmosphere, readied their instruments. "The lady is under my protection. Let no man nor woman traduce her name," Sebastian declared, his gaze sweeping the assembly. Arthur Pencombe, Miranda's perpetually nervous assistant, twisted his hat between fidgeting hands. "Begging your pardon, Your Grace, but the matter of succession is hardly a private concern. The ton has its expectations." The Duke's eyes hardened. "And I have mine, Mr. Pencombe. They begin with courtesy." He turned to the orchestra with an authoritative nod. "The first waltz, if you please, and may I request the honour, Duchess?" Sebastian extended his hand to Evelyn, whose eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "You honour me beyond measure, Your Grace," she replied, her voice steady despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm her composure. As he led her to the centre of the floor, Sebastian leaned close. "Let them watch, my dear. Let them see what true nobility means." The music swelled and they began to dance, a perfect measured waltz that spoke of years of practiced unity. The ton watched in reluctant admiration as the Duke guided his wife with tender precision. Miranda's face flushed beneath her careful powder. "This changes nothing," she hissed to Arthur. "A barren duchess is still a failure before God and society." Father Alaric Stone, the Duke's spiritual adviser, appeared silently at her elbow. "God measures differently than society, Lady Vallecrest. Perhaps it would serve you to consider his calculations rather than your own." As the waltz concluded, Sebastian did not release his wife's hand. Instead, he raised it to his lips in a gesture witnessed by all. "If my pride raised walls, your virtue raised them," he murmured, just loudly enough for those nearest to hear. No one dared laugh after that. The evening proceeded with strained cordiality. but beneath the polite exchanges and orchestral accompaniment, a current of tension flowed. Sebastian remained at Evelyn's side throughout, a fortress of resolve against the tide of whispers. As they departed in their landau carriage, Evelyn finally allowed her composure to falter. "They will never cease, Sebastian. The world demands an heir." Gaslight played across his features as he took her hand. "The world demands many things it has no right to ask, my love." The carriage wheels clattered against cobblestones, a rhythmic counterpoint to the silence between them. Outside, London fog wrapped around street lamps like spectral fingers. "What shall we do?" Evelyn asked at last, her words barely audible above the horse's hooves. Sebastian's gaze was fixed on some distant point beyond the carriage window. "We shall redefine inheritance, my dear. For too long, we have allowed bloodlines to dictate worth." He turned to her, his expression resolute. "Tomorrow we visit Blackthorn Orphanage." "The orphanage?" Evelyn's brow furrowed in confusion. "Yes," Sebastian nodded, his fingers caressing the white rose he had plucked from the ballroom arrangement. "For I have had a revelation, watching Miranda's cruelty tonight. What good is a legacy if it breeds only judgment? What use is a title that cannot shelter the innocent?" The carriage slowed as it approached Atherley House, its imposing facade a monument to generations of noble blood. "But the ton," Evelyn began. "The ton shall remember what is done here," Sebastian interrupted, his voice firm with conviction. "I promise you that." As they ascended the marble steps to their home, a whisper of change hung in the air between them. The night had not ended as Miranda Valcrest had intended, but the season would not unfold as anyone expected. Blackthorn Orphanage stood on London's edge, its grey stone walls weathered by decades of neglect. Once a grand estate, it had fallen to disrepair, much like the fortunes of its young inhabitants. As the Duke's brougham carriage approached through morning mist, curious faces appeared at smudged windows. "They watch us, as if we were apparitions," Evelyn observed, her ivory complexion luminous against her lilac gown. Sebastian helped her descend from the carriage, his movements protective. "We are apparitions to them, my dear, glimpses of a world they have been told they cannot enter." Mrs. Clara Wynne, a former nurse with practical hands and a forthright gaze, greeted them at the entrance. Her red hair escaped its loose bun as she curtsied hastily. "Your Grace, my lady, this is an unexpected honor." "The honor is ours, Mrs. Wynne," Sebastian replied, removing his hat. "We come not as visitors, but as petitioners." Clara's green eyes widened in surprise. She wiped her hands on her apron, a habit born of years tending to society's forgotten children. "Petitioners? I don't understand." "Perhaps we might discuss matters inside," Evelyn suggested, noting the gathering crowd of small, wide-eyed observers peering from doorways and staircases. They were led to a modest office where a coal fire struggled against the morning chill. On the wall hung a faded painting of the orphanage's founder, his stern countenance a reminder of charity given without warmth. "Do you seek a child?" Clara stated plainly once the door was closed, her directness a refreshing contrast to ton propriety. "No, Mrs. Wynne," Sebastian answered, his hand finding Evelyn's. "We seek many." Confusion crossed Clara's face. "I don't follow, Your Grace." Sebastian gestured toward the window, where the orphanage grounds lay barren and brown. "This institution requires patronage. My wife and I require purpose. Society whispers that we have failed in producing an heir, but perhaps we have simply misunderstood what it means to create a legacy." Evelyn stepped forward, her normally reserved demeanor giving way to quiet passion. "What my husband means to say is that we wish to restore Blackthorn, not merely its walls but its spirit, to create a place where children might thrive rather than merely survive. The Atherley Foundation for Children," Sebastian elaborated, "with you as its directress, Mrs. Wynne, and the Duchess as its patroness." Clara sank into a chair, overwhelmed. "This is unprecedented. The ton will talk." "The ton always talks," Evelyn replied, with newfound strength. "Let us give them something worthy of discussion." A knock at the door interrupted them. Arthur Pencombe stood nervously in the doorway, his reddish complexion more florid than usual. Your Grace?" Lady Valecrest requests your immediate presence at Carlton House. The Prince Regent's secretary has convened an emergency meeting of peers regarding what, Mr. Pencombe? Sebastian's tone was patient but firm. Regarding irregular successions and the preservation of noble bloodlines, Arthur finished, unable to meet the Duke's gaze. Lady Valecrest has brought certain matters to His Highness's attention. A moment of heavy silence followed. She moves quickly, Sebastian observed with grim humour. Tell Lady Valecrest I shall attend, with the Duchess. But, Your Grace, Arthur protested. The lady is my wife, Mr. Pencombe, Sebastian interrupted. Where matters of succession are concerned, she has more right to speak than any marquess. After Arthur's hasty departure, Clara studied the noble couple with newfound respect. They mean to challenge you publicly. Indeed, Sebastian nodded. Miranda has overplayed her hand. She believes herself the guardian of tradition, but she forgets that tradition must evolve or perish. Evelyn touched the white rose brooch at her throat, a gift from her husband on their wedding day. What shall we do? We shall attend, Sebastian answered, his blue eyes alight with purpose. And we shall bring the ledgers of Blackthorn with us. Ledgers? Clara frowned. Whatever for? Because, Mrs. Wynne, Sebastian smiled for the first time that day, I intend to rewrite the meaning of inheritance before the highest court in the land. As they prepared to leave, a small girl with dark braids appeared in the doorway, clutching a tattered doll. She curtsied with awkward determination. Are you an angel, miss? She asked Evelyn, her voice barely above a whisper. Evelyn knelt to meet the child's gaze. No, dear one, I am something far more useful, a duchess with a purpose. The carriage ride to Carlton House was silent with contemplation. London streets passed in a blur of grey stone and morning commerce, the city unaware of the revolution brewing within its aristocratic heart. They will try to humiliate you, Sebastian warned, as the Prince Regent's residence came into view. Miranda has gathered allies. Evelyn's hands were steady as she adjusted her gloves. There is no humiliation in truth, my love. If barrenness is my crime, let them pronounce sentence before witnesses. The grand salon of Carlton House blazed with chandeliers, the assembled peers murmuring in anticipation. Miranda Valecrest stood near the Prince Regent's empty chair, resplendent in emerald silk, her triumph barely concealed. The Duke and Duchess of Atherley, announced the Chamberlain, and the room fell silent. How good of you to join us, Miranda called, her voice carrying across the polished floor. We were discussing matters of grave concern to all noble houses. Indeed, Sebastian replied, escorting Evelyn forward with dignified calm. I find few matters graver than the welfare of England's children. The Prince Regent entered, corpulent and magnificent in royal regalia. All bowed or curtsied as protocol demanded. Your Highness, Miranda began immediately, I have brought to your attention the concerning matter of the Atherley succession. 3 years without issue threatens the stability of one of England's oldest titles. Fans stilled throughout the assembly. A seal cracked as a document was unsealed. The law is clear, continued Miranda, unfolding a parchment with theatrical precision. A noble marriage that produces no heir after 5 years may be subject to annulment by royal decree. The room erupted in hushed exclamations. Sebastian stepped forward, his countenance serene despite the assault. If I may address the gathering, Your Highness, he requested, his voice cutting through the commotion. The prince nodded his assent, curiosity evident beneath his practiced boredom. Sebastian produced the Blackthorn ledgers, placing them on a marble table with deliberate care. Lady Valecrest speaks of succession as if it were merely a matter of blood. I submit that true nobility lies not in whom we beget, but in whom we protect. He opened the first ledger, revealing columns of names. Children without families, futures without promise. The Atherley name has stood for 8 centuries, Sebastian continued. In that time, we have accumulated lands, titles, and wealth beyond measure. Yet what have we protected? Ourselves, our privilege. He turned to Evelyn, extending his hand. My wife has taught me that legacy is not written in bloodlines, but in lives changed. Evelyn joined him, her voice clear and unwavering. We propose the establishment of the Atherley Foundation for Children, a trust that will outlast any single heir, dedicated to raising England's forgotten children to become its future leaders. Father Alaric stepped forward from the crowd, his simple attire a stark contrast to the opulence surrounding him. Your Highness, if I may, the Church recognizes many forms of fruitfulness. What the Duke and Duchess propose is not the abandonment of succession, but its transformation. Miranda's perfect composure cracked slightly. This is preposterous. Charity is commendable, but it cannot replace the sacred duty of noble houses to maintain their bloodlines. Cannot it? Sebastian countered, his gaze sweeping the assembly. I declare before this assembly that my first step is hers, and our next shall be taken with the children of Blackthorn. The Prince Regent stirred, intrigued despite himself. An unusual proposition, Atherley. Unusual times demand unusual courage, Your Highness, Sebastian replied, his hand still holding Evelyn's. I ask not for exemption from duty, but for its redefinition. A murmur ran through the assembly, a tide turning imperceptibly toward compassion. But the ballroom would not breathe much longer. The morning of the royal decree dawned with London wrapped in expectant silence. Fog clung to the Thames like doubt to ambition, while in drawing rooms and breakfast parlours throughout Mayfair, the ton awaited news that would reshape their understanding of nobility. St. James's Palace stood resplendent against the grey sky, its Tudor brickwork a reminder of England's enduring institutions. Inside, beneath vaulted ceilings and ancestral portraits, the future of the Atherley line hung in precarious balance. Sebastian and Evelyn arrived in their finest regalia, he in midnight blue with the white rose of Atherley on his lapel, she in silver-white silk that caught the light like captured moonbeams. They moved with the synchronicity of hearts, long accustomed to bearing burdens together. Your Grace, Father Alaric greeted them in the antechamber, his weathered face grave yet hopeful. The Prince has reviewed your proposal through the night. His advisers are divided. And Lady Valicrest, Sebastian inquired, adjusting his signet ring with practiced calm. She arrived an hour past, Alaric replied, with Arthur Pencombe and documents from the College of Heralds regarding precedent in matters of succession. Evelyn's hands joined at her breast in her characteristic gesture of self-protection. Then we face not merely opinion, but law. Law is made by men, my dear, Sebastian reminded her gently. And what men make, men can unmake when justice demands it. Clara Wynne appeared from the corridor, her practical attire standing in stark contrast to the courtly splendor surrounding her. The children are assembled as requested, Your Grace, though I confess I understand little of your purpose in bringing them to court. Sometimes, Mrs. Wynne, Sebastian smiled enigmatically, change requires not merely argument, but witness. The great doors to the presence chamber swung open, revealing an assembly far larger than anticipated. Peers and their ladies lined the sides of the room, their finery creating a kaleidoscope of color and whispered anticipation. At the far end, the Prince Regent sat enthroned beneath a canopy of state, his expression inscrutable. Miranda Valecrest stood at the right hand of the royal dais, her emerald gown replaced by austere black, the color of judgment. Beside her, Arthur Pencombe clutched a portfolio of documents, his nervous demeanor suggesting the weight of their contents. The Duke and Duchess of Atherley, announced the Lord Chamberlain, his staff striking the floor with ceremonial finality. A path cleared as Sebastian and Evelyn processed forward, their steps measured to the rhythm of protocol. Behind them, in a formation that drew gasps from the assembly, came 20 children from Blackthorn Orphanage, each wearing a white rose upon their modest attire. Miranda's perfect features contorted momentarily before regaining their composed disdain. "By your Highness," she began without waiting for permission, "this theatrical display only underscores the gravity of our concern. The Duke brings orphans to court while England awaits a true heir. I bring England's future to court," Sebastian corrected, his voice carrying effortlessly to every corner of the chamber. "And I submit that they are truer heirs to our nation's greatness than many born to privilege." The Prince Regent leaned forward, curiosity piqued. "Explain yourself, Atherley." Lady Valecrest raises points of law that cannot be dismissed by sentiment, however touching. Sebastian nodded respectfully. Your Highness, noble houses exist to preserve what is best in England, not merely blood, but values, courage, compassion, duty. He gestured toward the children standing in solemn formation. These children possess all these qualities, yet lack only opportunity. A noble sentiment, the prince acknowledged, but sentiment does not secure succession. If I may, Your Highness, Evelyn stepped forward, her voice stronger than any in the assembly had heard before. The Atherley Foundation proposes not to abandon succession, but to expand it. My husband and I will continue to hope for children of our blood, but should Providence deny us that blessing, we have established a trust that will ensure the Atherley name serves England for generations to come. She turned to address the assembly directly. They said I would never give him an heir. Perhaps they were right. Perhaps I shall give him hundreds instead. A murmur rippled through the court. Fans stilled as the implications settled upon the collective consciousness of the ton. Miranda surged forward, her composure fracturing. This is absurdity. Your Highness, noble blood cannot be replaced by charitable whims. The law demands service to the crown, Sebastian interrupted, producing a sealed document from within his coat. And I submit that service takes many forms. He handed the document to the Lord Chamberlain, who presented it to the prince with ceremonial reverence. A royal charter, Sebastian explained as the prince broke the seal, creating the Atherley Inheritance Act, which establishes that should my line end without direct heirs of my blood, the Atherley title and responsibilities shall pass to a council of trustees selected from graduates of the foundation to continue our work in perpetuity. The prince studied the document, his expression shifting from skepticism to grudging admiration. Clever, Atherley. You do not abandon tradition, you transform it. Tradition without compassion is merely habit, Your Highness, Sebastian replied, and England deserves better than habit from her nobility. Arthur Pencombe stepped forward, his voice quavering. But Your Highness, the precedent. The College of Heralds has never... The College of Heralds, the prince interrupted with sudden decisiveness, answers to the crown, not tradition, and the crown finds merit in the Duke's innovation. He rose, signaling the assembly to attention. Let it be known that we, George, Prince of Wales, acting with the authority of our father, do hereby approve the Atherley Inheritance Act, recognizing both its adherence to the spirit of noble duty and its vision for England's future. Miranda's face drained of color. Your Highness cannot. We can and we have, the prince replied with finality. The matter is settled. The assembly erupted in exclamations of surprise and hurried conversation. Sebastian turned to Evelyn, taking her hands in his. Before these witnesses I shall not see her shamed, he declared, his voice carrying above the commotion. Let no man traduce her name, for if there is fault tonight, let it be mine to bear. Father Alaric stepped forward, his eyes bright with unshed tears. Your Grace, if I might suggest a fitting conclusion to these proceedings. At Sebastian's nod, Alaric turned to address the children of Blackthorn, who had maintained their dignified formation throughout. Children, present your roses. With practiced coordination, each child removed their white rose and stepped forward, placing the blooms in a growing circle around Sebastian and Evelyn. What grows from love, Alaric pronounced, outlasts what grows from obligation. This circle represents the true inheritance of Atherley, not a line descending but a circle expanding. The Prince Regent, moved despite his cynical nature, descended from the dais to stand before the noble couple. Atherley, you have rewritten succession today. Let us see if history remembers your courage or your folly. Sebastian bowed deeply. Either would be preferable to being forgotten, Your Highness. As the court dispersed in wonder and speculation, Miranda Veilacrest stood alone, her perfect poise unable to disguise her defeat. Arthur hovered uncertainly at her side. This changes nothing, she hissed, though her voice lacked conviction. The ton will never accept this mockery of tradition. The ton, Clara Wynne observed quietly as she gathered the children, has already begun to accept it, Lady Valcrest. Look around you. Indeed, several noble ladies had approached the orphans with expressions of curiosity rather than disdain. Two earls were in earnest conversation with Father Alaric, while a viscount examined the Atherley Foundation charter with evident interest. The season, it seemed, had found a new fascination. Outside St. James's Palace, as Sebastian handed Evelyn into their carriage, he paused to study her face in the gentle spring sunlight. "Are you content, my love?" Evelyn touched the white rose at her throat, her grey-blue eyes serene. "Not content, Sebastian. Awakened. They said I would never give you an heir. They did not consider that I might become one." The carriage pulled away from the palace, bearing the Duke and Duchess of Atherley toward a future unlike any the peerage had witnessed before. But the Tun would remember what was done here. 5 years transformed Blackthorn beyond recognition. What once stood grey and forbidding now gleamed with warmth and purpose, its gardens flourishing where barren earth had lain. Within its walls, 200 children received education, care, and most precious of all, dignity. On a golden autumn evening, as sunset painted the sky in hues of amber and rose, the Duke and Duchess of Atherley walked the gravelled paths of what was now called Atherley Academy. Sebastian's arm supported Evelyn, whose advanced pregnancy had finally come in their 8th year of marriage, a joy made more profound by the journey preceding it. "The Marquess Valacrest has left for the continent," Sebastian remarked, reading from a letter that had arrived that morning. "It seems she finds London society insufferably provincial in its recent enthusiasms." Evelyn smiled, her hand resting on her swollen belly. "Miranda could never understand that true nobility grows stronger when shared, not hoarded." They paused before the Academy's central fountain, where a sculpture of a white rose in marble caught the last rays of sunlight. Around them, children in simple but well-made uniforms moved with purpose between classes and activities, their voices creating a symphony of hope. "Your Grace," called a young man of perhaps 16, approaching with a leather portfolio. "The architectural plans for the Dover branch are complete. Mrs. Wynne asked me to present them for your approval." Sebastian studied the boy, once a street urchin, now standing straight-backed with clear eyes and confident speech. "Excellent work, Thomas. You have your father's gift for precision." The young man bowed, pride evident in his bearing. "Thank you, Your Grace. Though I never knew my father, I like to think he would approve of the man I am becoming." "He would indeed," Evelyn assured him, her voice gentle. "As do we." As Thomas departed, Sebastian's gaze followed him thoughtfully. The first generation of Atherley trustees begins to emerge. In 10 years, that young man may help govern this foundation. And perhaps, Evelyn added, teach our child the meaning of true inheritance. The bell tower chimed, signaling the evening assembly. From across the grounds, children and teachers converged toward the great hall, where Father Alaric waited to deliver his weekly address on moral philosophy. Clara Wynne joined them, her practical attire now complemented by the quiet authority of her position as directress. "Your Grace, the Board of Governors has arrived for the quarterly review, and I've received 17 new applications from noble families wishing to establish similar foundations." "The Tun follows fashion," Sebastian observed wryly, "even when that fashion is compassion." "Fashion becomes tradition given time," Evelyn reminded him, accepting his arm as they walked toward the hall. "And this tradition has proven its worth." Inside, candles illuminated rows of expectant faces. Children of all ages sat attentive, while at the back, visitors from London society observed with growing respect what had once been dismissed as ducal eccentricity. Father Alaric stood at the lectern, his face more lined than 5 years prior, but his eyes brighter with fulfilled purpose. "Tonight," he began, "we consider the true meaning of inheritance." Sebastian and Evelyn took their seats at the front, distinguished not by elaborate chairs, but by the reverence with which the children regarded them. "Inheritance," Alaric continued, "is not merely what we receive, but what we pass on, not only in possessions, but in values, not only to our children of blood, but to all whom Providence places in our care." A shaft of evening light pierced the stained glass window above, a recent installation depicting the white rose of Atherley surrounded by reaching hands. It bathed the assembly in golden radiance, transforming the simple hall into a cathedral of purpose. The Atherley name, Alaric's voice strengthened, has become more than a title. It has become a covenant, a promise that no child under its protection shall walk alone. Evelyn touched the white rose brooch at her throat, her eyes meeting Sebastian's in shared understanding. What had begun as defiance against cruelty had blossomed into a revolution of compassion that now spread through England's great houses. After the assembly, as twilight deepened into evening, the couple stood in the rose garden where white blooms glowed like stars in the gathering darkness. "She'll never give you an heir," they said, and yet here stood their legacy, more enduring than any single bloodline could ensure. "What shall we name the child?" Evelyn asked, her hand enfolded in her husband's. Sebastian's gaze swept across the academy grounds where lanterns were being lit along the paths. "If a boy, perhaps Alaric. If a girl, Clara." Evelyn touched the rose and answered, "Then may our inheritance be compassion." The children of the orphanage lit lanterns, forming a corridor of light to the gate, each flame reflected in the gold of the crest, the brilliance of a new kind of royalty. Father Alaric observed from afar, murmuring, "Thus is written the true genealogy." That night, the wind blew across the hills, carrying with it the last echo of the phrase that had changed everything. "She'll never give you an heir," they said, and yet she became one. For the heart, when loved publicly, inherits the right to endure forever. The moral of this story reminds us that true nobility lies not in bloodlines or titles, but in the compassion we show to others. The Atherleys transformed their personal pain into purpose, redefining legacy as service rather than succession. Their courage to stand against society's cruel expectations created ripples of change that outlasted any individual life. Like Sebastian and Evelyn, we all face moments where we must choose between accepted tradition and higher purpose. Their story challenges us to consider, what inheritance are we creating with our lives? Are we merely passing down possessions, or are we establishing legacies of compassion that will flourish long after we're gone? If you enjoyed this tale of courage, compassion, and redefined nobility, please share your thoughts in the comments below. What legacy would you most wish to create? Subscribe for more stories that inspire us to look beyond convention and embrace a more compassionate vision of success and meaning.